Welcome all to BFantasyFootball Podcast. I'm your host Derek, and this is my brother and my co-host Marcel. Today we're going to go over our top pickups for the waiver wire of Week 1. We're also going to discuss the news and what we learned from Week 1. So starting off, we're going to go over the news. Le'Veon Bell, Denzel Mims, they're both put on short-term IR, so they'll be out for at least 3 weeks. So there is a potential for Gore, Pirine, and Adams to become the next guy up in the running back, but where it's such a mess, I'm not sure if you want to touch any of them, to be honest. Michael Thomas also suffered a high ankle sprain this week. He claims he's going to play through it, but it is a little concerning, as we saw with Barkley last year. He took a few weeks rest and came back too early, and he was slow to start. Maybe Marcel can touch on that more after I'm done. James Conner suffered an ankle sprain. There is a chance he may play this week, so any hopeful of people, his backups, you may want to wait on them just to see what happens with Conner. But if you desperately need someone, we will look in that backfield. Devontae Parker suffered a hamstring injury. We don't know his condition, whether he'll play or not. Probably. Njoku's out for the next 3 weeks. Philip Lindsay had an ankle injury. And people who are out for the season is Blake Jarwin and Marlon Mack with ACL and a torn Achilles, respectively. So, Mars, what do you think about Michael Thomas's high ankle sprain?
Well, when it comes to the sports medicine world, high ankle sprains are definitely something we do not like to see. So the difference between a high ankle and a low ankle sprain is the structure of which the ligament has to hold together. Your ligaments hold 2 bones together. So basically, we all know you have your shin bone, but then you also have a second bone in your shin. It's called your fibula, and a high ankle sprain is a small tear to that ligament which holds your main shin bone and your tibia to your fibula. So every time you take a step and the end of your stride, that spreads those 2 bones apart, always putting stress on that ligament. So this being said, it's a ligament that takes a longer time to heal. So if he can avoid hurting it more in the next 4 weeks, I like his outcome. But the playing scares me. Every time he goes to burst off that end of the acceleration, he could hurt it. Tape does help if they can tape that up, but I don't like it. End terms, I don't like it. Like I said, 4 weeks is the goal. If you can get by 4 weeks, then you're trending up. You're on the right side. But for these high ankle sprains, it's 4 to 6 weeks. It seems mild, so I'm going with the 4. Low ankle sprains is usually a couple days to 2 weeks max, depending on the severity. So yeah, Michael Thomas, don't like it for now. Obviously, you drafted him with high draft capital, and he might still get the target, so you have to play him, unless you have very good other wide receivers that you can play in his spot. Then I want to touch on the Philip Lindsay injury. It's actually turf toe, and it's not an ankle injury.
Okay.
It was reported ankle during the game, but it's turf toe. It's mild, but the bad thing about mild turf toe is something that's very easy to injure once you already have it, and usually takes a good recovery, so he's not going to get a lot of reps in practice. That being said, Melvin Gordon probably trending up for touches, but they have Pittsburgh next week, where if Saquon can't score against Pittsburgh, I ain't playing Melvin Gordon against Pittsburgh. So that's that. Devontae Parker, he had the hamstring injury earlier in the offseason, and it's come back. So obviously the tissue wasn't healed properly, which that is a red flag to me. Bell hamstring injury at his age is a red flag for me. So this being said, the injuries that occurred, I don't like. I don't know if you guys watched the Chargers game, but Mike Williams' shoulder, he had 2, 1 catch, 1 incompletion, that I noticed his shoulder was hampering him. I did independent study in biomechanics, and biomechanics is human movement. And the way he was moving his shoulder and his body to catch the ball, you could tell he was still hampered by pain. The good sign is he had 9 targets, so if he can get through this shoulder injury, I'm going to give him till week 4 before I'd say he's 100% cleared if there's no setbacks. So yeah, that's pretty much my injury update.
Yeah, good to know. So with that Michael Thomas high ankle sprain that we're concerned about, do you think it's worth rostering Traquan Smith at all as
Um,
a potential, what the heck flex? I mean, he averages 10 yards per target over the last few years, so he does have a lot of upside if he does see a few targets, but is he worth rostering?
I don't see Traquan Smith being worth a roster spot, as he won't get targets in the red zone because they have their Jared Cook, they have Alvin Kamara, and then they have Emmanuel Sanders, who already caught one. That being said, Emmanuel Sanders, I don't know what's his own percentage, but I'd be willing to play Emmanuel Sanders because he'll be on for every down. He'll be on for the red zone, where I can see Traquan Smith might play more of the open field, and they just bring in the old reliable Michael Thomas, even though he's hurt, bring him in for more of your red zone touches. I
Yeah,
could be
Emmanuel
wrong.
Sanders is about 80% owned, so
Oh,
most leagues
he's
are, you're not going to get him.
higher than I thought, which good for him.
Yeah. No, I was pretty high on him this offseason, just because
Yeah,
I thought he could be that number two guy. So,
rightfully so.
yep. And I mean, with that injury, it boosted him up some. And I mean, but the problem is he may get the top coverage if Thomas goes to sit, which then maybe Tricon will look a little bit better just because he's getting the secondary looks. But with Cook and Alvin Kamara there, he's playing third biggest option with Thomas out. So
Yeah,
yeah, it kind of worries me there. I mean, he might get a touchdown and a 30-yard bomb, but
yeah.
it's kind of like any other position. You're just hoping for the best there.
I'm off of him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Connor with that ankle sprain, he is a possibility to play. The coach did say we're leaving the light on. That's a quote from the coach. So he has a chance of playing this week. So that does make me worried about picking up Benny Snell. I mean, Benny Snell is only like very low owned. I'm trying to look up what it was.
14%. 14.6.
Yeah, 14.6. So he could be useful if Connor sits, especially if it's almost better if Connor keeps possibility of playing and then decides not to play at the last minute, or they decide, because then that way they almost forced to just play who they think is best, which Benny Snell seems to be. Whenever there's someone whenever Connor has an injury, Benny Snell's the first one to play, but whenever they have weeks to practice, then it seems to be more of a committee and seems to be quite a messy backfield, to be honest.
Yeah, to add in there, I've Benny Snell. I know we're not there yet, but as my RB2 waiver pickup,
Okay.
he would be RB1 if we knew James Conner was out. James Conner's not out, but here's my thing. There's almost no leagues I'm in where Benny Snell is not owned because I would own him, given Conner's history. I don't know how much the population out there is educated on Connor's past, but he had cancer, which means, he also went through chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is very tough on soft tissue, and that's why he's having these injuries, these soft tissue injuries over and over and over, and it's not always reoccurring in the same areas, but multiple joints in his body. He's very talented, very strong man, but his body and his past is what's hampering him. And that being said, I would pick up Benny Snell for the high upside. If Connor plays, you sit Benny Snell, whatever. If Connor plays, gets hurt again, he'll be out longer. So I'm picking up Benny Snell. Obviously, I have him number 2, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like to use injury prone for most players, but in Connor's defense, he almost kind of is, just because of his past. I mean, it kind of wants you to say that word. I mean, you don't like to say it because, I mean, look at Dalvin Cook last year. People are starting to label him as injury prone, and he played most of the games last year. But, yeah, he is one that I would almost want to label injury prone just because of his past history.
Yeah.
So, with that said, do you want to start going through our pickups?
I want to talk about what I learned this week first, if you don't mind.
Okay, yep. No problem.
We can end with the waiver wire pickup.
Yep.
My first line is, so Austin Eckler was wearing Nyheim Hines' jersey.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like that. Philip Rivers' best friend reanimated onto the Colts.
8 for 8 in the receiving territory. 7 carries, which I know that's not a lot, but that's when Marlon Mack also was there. Marlon Mack's gone. So is that an extra carry per game? Extra 2 carries per game? If he gets to 9, oh my God. But he had 7 carries, and I'm going to say that's going to be his week average, if not high. I'm going to say 5 to 7. But it's that receiving game that it was there, and it was there when they were up 17-0 to start the game. He was still getting receptions. He was still getting touches. They're not going to be up 17. I know they had to play catch up in the end, and that accounted for a couple targets, but I'm saying Nyheim Hines is what Austin Eckler was. Maybe not as talented, better offensive line. I'm going to say I'm high on Nyheim Hines now.
Yeah, sorry.
And he's only owned in 36% of leagues, so
yeah,
go out and get him.
I see him similar to what Austin Eckler used to be when Melvin Gordon was there.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be Jonathan Taylor, and it's just they have new names. That's all it is.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I was referring
Philip Rivers,
to.
he's been a target in the running backs, even last year especially, to an extent that just is not matching any other teams in the league. I mean, even Jonathan Taylor had 6 targets. I mean, and 6 receptions too, so that proves well for him. So, I definitely agree with the Nyheim Hines pickup. He is my number 1, maybe number 2. It depends what league. I mean, PPR, he's my number 1, but standard, he probably isn't my number 1 pickup. I would probably want to go more with a couple other guys.
Yeah. And next, David Montgomery, with the injured groin, only had 55% of non-QB carries. Not a lot of carries, percentage-wise. But I believe he looked a lot better than last year between the tackles and appeared to shed and bounce off defenders more than last year. He ran 4.92 yards per carry. That was better than all games last year but 2 of 16 played games. While being hurt, while having limited practice over the last 3 weeks. So I'm trending up on David Montgomery already. I know it might be early, but he didn't re-injure the groin, which means next year we'll put him at 4 weeks, which was the end timetable. So I'm all in on David Montgomery now. Only had, I believe, 13 carries. I can see that going up to 16 next week. Probably going to break the 70 yards carried, so you got a floor of 7 points. Could get in for a touchdown. Also had a 10-yard reception, so that's another point. So, I mean, I'm in on David Montgomery now. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, he did definitely look a lot better than he did last year, but the only thing is this was the Detroit defense, so that is a little concerning. Is this just because Detroit was bad, or was he actually improved like he kind of looked? Like you said, he had almost a 5-yard per carry, so that looks really well. Without scoring a touchdown, that does make his numbers look worse, so if you want to try to do a buy low, this would probably be one of your best chances, because I mean, people might be still scared a little bit about the injury from before, but he did look pretty good. So we're hoping he is a person that maybe you can try to buy low, but don't try to buy him too. Don't spend too much, I wouldn't say, because I am still concerned that maybe this was just the Detroit defense, and it's hard to say. I'm not sure who he's playing next week, so that would worry me. Oh, the Giants. Oh, yeah, start him.
Yeah, Benny Snell just ran for 119 yards, so.
Yeah, so maybe this would be your week to trade for him before he goes against the Giants.
Yeah. Next, I'm just going to wrap up a couple here from me, a couple extra points I noticed this weekend. So Latavius Murray can still be a flex play in 12-team leagues or deeper. He had 15 carries, and Alvin Kamara had 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, Latavius Murray can still be a play. Ryan Tannehill is a very good quarterback. He played a tough Denver defense. I know they lost Von Miller, but they're still a tough defense, and he didn't throw any interceptions, didn't have any kind of turnovers. Has poor matchups in his favor till week 5. So right now his own percentage is quite low, or his rostered percentage. So I believe after week 5 he's going to be almost free off the waivers, and I believe if you've been streaming quarterbacks, that'll be your time to pick him up and play him week in and week out till you win the championship with him.
Yeah, he's 32%, 33% owned right now, so he is, to me, also the same thing, a long-term pickup, especially after the next couple weeks once he gets easier opponents. But, I mean, he is against the Jags this week, so that is a little tempting.
Exactly, very tempting. I don't like Mitch Trubisky, but he played okay. Yes, like we just said, the Lions defense may have helped that out, but his season-long schedule is very favorable. I just took a look at that not too long ago. So in 2 QB leagues or weekly streamer option, he's playable. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other things that you learned this weekend, but
I mean, he does tend to play good against the Detroit defense. That is Trubisky. He's always, even last year, he had 2 good games, even though he looked terrible all year. Anytime he played against the Detroits, he seems to just do it. I mean, he looked terrible in the first half and almost the first 3 quarters, and then he just woke up and went into beast mode. It seems he seems to be a person, once he gets his confidence in the game, he does well. But the problem is he has to do that every single week. He seems to have to regain that confidence. So that does worry me. And with the news story about Allen Robinson, that also kind of worries me for Trubisky. Because if that is true about him deleting all his Bear-related stuff off of Twitter and demanding a trade or requesting a trade from them, that is concerning. Because losing your top receiver, and I mean, he's a good receiver, that would concern me for long-term using of Trubisky. But for the next week, I can see Trubisky being a few weeks until we really know what's going on there.
Yeah. Anything else you had on the weekend, Derek?
No, that'd be all for me.
All right. So we're going to move into waiver wire pickups now. I'll list my top 5 RBs, and I'll give a quick chat on them. Then I'll let Derek jump in and give his 5 RBs if there's some that are different or if he wants to add comments to that. So my number 1 pickup of the week is Nyheim Hines, 36.7% owned. I believe this is also Derek's for full PPR and maybe half-point PPR. His numbers talk for himself, spoke for themselves, and we talked about him earlier, so I'm not going to get too into depth there. Benny Snell, my number 2, I already talked about him. He had 19 carries after James Conner already had 6, so I'd be 25 from the running backs, from the top 2 running backs in a bell cow offense. So if James Conner doesn't play, Benny Snell's great. James Robinson, 29% owned, 16 carries, all of the team carries, as they were playing catch-up most of the game. He had more carries than Saquon, Drake, Mostert, Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, David Montgomery, Nick Chubb, and David Johnson. These are all guys he drafted ahead of him, and James Robinson is only 29% owned. He had 1 catch for 28 yards, which was very impressive too. His yards per carry, I think they were 3.9 or 3.8. These are the same numbers we saw from Leonard Fournette last year, but this is against a tough Colts defense. So I'm high on him. 29% owned. I mean, go get him. He's out there. Number 4, I have Malcolm Brown. 2 touchdowns. Had, I believe, every carry with inside the 10 and inside the 5. Number spoke for himself there. Had over 70 rushing yards. So I was very interested there. And I believe as the season goes on, Cam Akers might take over. But if they're really in the fringe of getting a playoff spot and not getting the playoff spot, the trust they have in Malcolm Brown might keep him on the field, and that'll be better for fantasy purposes. My number 5, I have Joshua Kelly. I believe he's the one that took over the Melvin Gordon role. He had 16 carries.
12.
Oh, wow. My apologies. 12 carries, but that is also his first NFL game, and he's only going to get better from here. And then I also added the name Peyton Barber just because he had the 2 touchdowns, but his yards per carry were disgusting, but they did trust him around the goal line. I think Peyton Barber is only a short-term pickup. So if you need someone for this week, say if your James Conner's hurt, your Lev Bell's hurt, sure, go get Peyton Barber, hope for a touchdown. If you can't get the other guys I just named off, I'll pass it on to Derek now.
Yeah, so I agree with most of those points. I do actually have James Robinson as one of my top pickups as well. He's probably my third. I do like Malcolm Brown. I find Sony Michel a little underowned at 54.6. Yes, Cam Newton is going to steal some red zone touches, but he did the same thing with CMC back in the day. And what happens is all of a sudden the defense really has to focus on him, and then Sony Michel has an open lane just to run into the touchdown. So with that, I mean, he had 10 carries for 37 yards, so he's not. I would say probably he's my fourth favorite pickup, maybe even fifth, but he is someone to keep an eye out on because with his backups not looking too well, I would be worried. I know Rex Burkhead did a pretty good run there. But Rex Burkhead never seems to stay healthy, although neither is Sony Michel. So I guess I actually have him lower. I have him at 5. Boston Scott, we tried to see what he was going to become, but with his Miles Sanders coming back, I wouldn't want to touch him anymore. He was someone that I thought was going to do all right this week, but he fell flat on his face. Now, the Washington D-line is very good, so that is wondering why maybe he did so bad. And he may be a lot better this week than he was last week just because not playing that crazy D-line. Actually, never mind, he's playing the Rams. So, yeah, Boston Scott is, to me, is kind of dead in the water because Miles Sanders come back soon enough. If Miles Sanders not back next week, or this week, he will be probably next week. So now looking at my rankings, I probably have Murray and Alexander Mattison. If they're out there, pick them up. They're between 68 to 60% owned, so you likely can't pick them up. But, I mean, they are high upside handcuffs that actually have flex use every week. After that, I have Malcolm Brown and James Robinson tied kind of for my second spot. James Robinson, he has pretty good talent, and he has the hold of the job there. He did a 3.9, so like Marcel said, that is pretty much what Fournette did, and they were playing from behind most of the time, so using him, they weren't doing that much. Malcolm Brown, I do have some concerns just because this guy's been on the team for the last few years, and they keep drafting new running backs, but they keep using him, so that makes me question what if they're just really bad at drafting running backs or what their problem is. I'm guessing as the season goes on, his touches are going to dwindle. And my concern is, Cam Akers is going to eventually prove out to be better. Benny Snell, I do like him, but you have to kind of like Madison, treat him like a high-end handcuff that could see some looks just because they might try to do that with Connor to give him some rest. And if Connor is out for this week or even possible more than just 1 week, then he's definitely top of my list. You got to monitor the news as much as you can. Chase Edmonds is another one that I have just as a high-end handcuff as well because he can be used. I mean, he ended up getting 6 carries and 3 receptions this week, so he's definitely looked at. I'm looking at people like Peyton Barber. I agree with Marcel. He is a temporary starter only, in my opinion. Gibson's going to probably take that job sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, he's the one that's most trusted. And the same thing with Adrian Peterson. He's the one that's right now temporarily as a temporary starter. He's a good guy to chuck in there, but it's going to be a messy backfield as the season goes along. So I'd be worried about that. So that's all I have for running backs.
Yeah. You can list off your top wide receivers, and then I'll jump in after.
Sounds great. My top wide receiver is Anthony Miller, especially with the news about Allen Robinson. He's 41.1% owned, and so he's out there in some leagues. I know not every league has him. But with the news from Allen Robinson, it makes it tempting to pick him up because he has high upside, and at the very least, even if you get him, maybe someone would trade you a pretty good equity if Robinson does get traded, and maybe that would be your best bet is to trade him at his highest value before he even plays another game without Robinson. Robbie Anderson is there, but he is 70% owned, so I'm not really too high on him. Paris Campbell, I am very interested in him. He's gotten he got 9 targets this week, so he does seem to be Phillip Rivers' possibly number 1 target, with T.Y. Hilton not looking as great as he used to. Sammy Watkins, he's probably my 3rd favorite, and that is just because him and Kelsey seem to be, whenever they're playing against man defense, they are the people that thrive, and whenever they're playing against zone, it seems to be McCole Hardman and Tyreek Hill. So for Watkins, he's a type of guy that you can only play more in your flex, and you have to almost see what kind of defense he's playing against and try to throw him in there. He was supposed to be finally working on running routes, which is crazy after being in the league for quite a few years. So hopefully that solves itself, and maybe he does prove to be better. Preston Williams, he's 69% owned, so I would like him, but where he's highly owned, I'm not sure if you'd get him in your league. Most leagues you probably won't, but with the Devontae Parker injury, he's tempting. And that would be all for me as my high, guys.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that our lists are very similar. So I had Robbie Anderson at 1, Anthony Miller at 2, and the sole reason I had Anthony Miller below Robbie Anderson is because Allen Robinson hasn't left yet. Who knows, maybe they'll give him a contract extension or a bonus or something to suit him for the season or make him happy. And who knows how good Anthony Miller will be as the wide receiver 1. So I have Anthony Miller as my number 2. Paris Campbell at 3, only 30% owned, as you said, 9 targets. Mike Williams is my 4. Like I said earlier, he's still hampered by the shoulder, so if he can clear this, he seemed to be Tyrod's favorite target. And Preston Williams is my 5, 7 targets, only 2 receptions. He was playing against New York. But yeah, like you said, 70% owned. So those are my wide receivers. If you guys have anyone in mind and you want to shoot us a question of what we think, if you're in a deeper league, let us know and we'll give you a response. So now we can move on to tight end streamers of the week. For me, I have a 2-pack. The first is for your deeper leagues. So I'm talking 14 or more teams where there's not really many high-quality tight ends left on the streams. I would grab and play Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. He gets Arizona this week, who are the best teams in terms of fantasy production for the tight end. He's coming off 8 targets, which is a lot of targets for a tight end. He only caught 4 balls, but he had a touchdown out there. And the man is 6'6" and really good at finding soft spots. So I really like him, especially this week. As the season goes on, we'll see what happens. My regular leagues, 12 teams, 10 teams, tight end streamer of the week is Chris Herndon. 41% owned, had 6 of 7 catches against one of the toughest defense in the league in the Buffalo Bills. And Lev Bell is out, so who's the checkdowns going to? Not Frank Gore. They're going to Chris Herndon. So I see him as those 7 receptions he had this week as his floor. So if you want the volume, playing Chris Herndon, especially in half-point PPR and full-point PPR, and I believe the New York Jets will score more than a touchdown this week. So that's where I'm at there in my tight end streamers. How about you?
Yeah, for me, I have Mike Gesicki and Chris Herndon as my top 2 targets in shallow leagues, because Mike Gesicki's 58.5% owned. So he's owned in a lot of spots, but with Parker being injured and, like you said, the other guys on the Jets being all injured, it does open up a lot of targets to get checked down to. So they are both tempting for me. Looking at Dallas Goedert, he is also on my radar because he played extremely well. He's 27% owned, and he has a chance to not really push to be number 1 tight end, of course, but where there's no one else really playing, he is tempting to get. So for deep leagues, I saw both Jordan Akins and Logan Thomas as my 2 pickups. Like you said, Logan Thomas did get a lot of targets last week, and so I'm hoping that continues. I am a little worried that maybe the Arizona Cardinals aren't as easy to beat on tight end this year as they were last year, so we'll see what happens there. But he would be someone that if you really need a spot to start, he would be one of them. Jordan Akins, he was one of the guys that when Watson was in trouble, he would look to. So that makes him a little more tempting because, yeah, he only had two receptions and 2 targets, but he was looked at in the red zone, and the same thing last year too. And so now I'm going to talk about my defense. My top defense of the week is the Los Angeles Rams. So they're only 13.3% owned, and they're going against Philly. And if anyone else saw how bad that O-line looked for Philly, I mean, the Washington football team was just putting holes through it. Now, they have a really good D-line as well, but, I mean, the Rams are the same thing. They did a good job against the Cowboys, so I can see them doing the same thing against Philly, but even better. So, yeah, I would not play Wentz this week because I'd be very scared of that, to be honest. My other defenses, I would be interested in using the Washington football team against Arizona. They're only 1.7% owned. They did really well against Philly, so I'd be curious to see what they can do against Arizona. I am a little concerned, though, because Kyler Murray is a shifty quarterback. So I'm also picking the Arizona Cardinals as other what-the-heck defense to use because they did pretty well last week, and Washington doesn't have the greatest O-line either. So those are my 3 defense.
Yeah. Okay. I very much agree with the LA Rams pick. They're my number 1 defense pick. But what happens getting into week 2 is people are going to be streaming defenses, so you need a backup. You might be high on, you said Washington you're high on against Arizona. I'm very out on that, but that's a matter of opinion. Yep. My opinion is I'm out on that just because I believe that spread offense, it takes away what your defensive line can do, and you have to have more corners, less defensive line players on the field and more corners and stuff with that spread offense. So that being said, I don't really believe in Washington, but hey, like you said, dart throw. I am actually high on Kansas City Chiefs this week, which you may not be.
I actually am as well.
They play against the Chargers, which, yes, Tyrod's a safe quarterback, doesn't throw interceptions. But if they don't score points, I mean, they played Cincinnati. I don't think Cincinnati's defense is that great. And they, scored 16 points against them? I believe a good Chiefs defense who have a good offense pushing back every time the Chargers start on the field. It's going to be at their own 20 or it's going to be deep in their own zone, which means they have to extend long drives, giving the Kansas City playmaker defensive players a chance to make a play on the ball. And that being said, I don't believe the Chargers even compete in this game. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said, yeah, Chargers can compete, but losing some key defensive players, this and that, I don't see the Chargers competing. And that on the other side of the ball being said, play CEH because that guy's going to have 25 carries again. So anyway, so that wraps up my defense, and moving on to my quarterback streamer of the week. I know we warned you on one of our past 2 episodes about Daniel Jones with the terrible matchups starting the season, and that might be reflective of his 55% roster rate or percentage. But I think Daniel Jones played very, very well against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. That is a stingy defense, and he was able to throw 2 touchdowns, throw for 279 yards. He rushed 4 times for 22 yards, so you have another baseline play in his rushing ability. He has Chicago next week. Good defense, but I'm not as scared of Chicago now as I was in the past. So potentially, I think you can play Daniel Jones' stream option this week.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just also want to let people know that Kalen Ballage was signed with the Jets, so we'll see what happens there. I mean, he was ducking passes last year, so I'm not looking forward to using him at all. No. I don't think that's a worry at all, other than maybe it just makes it even more of a murky backfield. So, yeah. Anything else you got there, Mars?
Nope, I got it all in.
Okay, well, I guess that wraps up today's podcast. Please don't forget to click that like button and subscribe on YouTube. Also, follow us on Twitter at BoudreauxBrosFF, and you can follow our personal accounts at Marcel_BFF and at Derek_BFF. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask us questions about our rankings, start sit, trades, and any other waiver wire pickups you may have. Thanks again, and see you next time.
See you.